listen, I gotta cry, 'cause crying.
1968 was on fire. Cities were burning. Leaders were falling. The whole world was breaking apart. But something else was happening, too. In the recording studios, late at night, away from the headlines. Singers were creating music so powerful, it stopped people cold. Ballads so deep, they made grown men cry and never apologize for it. You think you know these songs. You don't. Not the full story. 10 ballads, 1 unforgettable year, and the truth behind why these songs still hit different today. This is the real sound of 1968. Number 10, Percy Sledge, Take Time to Know Her. Close your eyes for just a second. Picture a man, a good man, a man who loves hard, but somewhere along the way he missed the signs. He was too busy, too proud, too sure of himself, and now she's gone.
I felt that truly loved.
That's what Take Time to Know Her is about. It's a warning song, a ballad so gentle it sneaks right up on you. You don't realize it hit you until you're already feeling it in your chest.
Everything I'd ever.
Percy Sledge recorded this at Muscle Shoals Sound in Alabama, the same musical home that gave us When a Man Loves a Woman 2 years before.
I've been dreaming of, but she was bad.
The producer was Marvin Gaye, the label was Atlantic Records, and the song was written by Steve Davis and Don Lytle. It carried that same warm, aching sound Muscle Shoals was always known for. It reached the top 20 on the R&B chart in 1968, but honestly, it deserved so much more.
I didn't know it. A pretty smile. Never.
The lyrics are almost like advice from a father to a son. Slow down, pay attention, don't lose what matters most. Here's what gets me. Percy Sledge was still a young man when he recorded this, and yet he sang it like a man who had already lost everything and was looking back with tired eyes.
Did show it. All I knew is what I could.
That kind of maturity in a voice, that's rare. That's what separated R&B singers from everyone else. They didn't just perform, they testified.
See, and I knew I wanted her for me.
Now, why did this fade? Because When a Man Loves a Woman was so massive, so career-defining, that everything else Percy Sledge released lived in that shadow. Radio programmers already had their Percy Sledge moment.
Took her home to mama. Mama.
They didn't always look further down the catalog, and that's a real shame. Because Take Time to Know Her is, in many ways, the more grown-up record.
See my future bride. Lord, she looked at her.
If you've never added this one to your playlist, tonight is the night. And that right there is just the warm-up. Because number 9 is where things start to get really deep. Number 9, James Carr, A Man Needs a Woman.
I just can't keep it all to myself now.
Now, I need you to stop what you're doing and really hear what I'm about to say. James Carr might be the most underappreciated soul singer who ever lived. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being dramatic for the camera. I'm telling you a fact that serious music people know and the mainstream world somehow miss.
For as long as I've been running around, I find
When you hear A Man Needs a Woman, you feel it before you even understand it. His voice doesn't just sing the words, it bleeds them. It's like he took all the loneliness in the world and pressed it into 3.5 minutes of pure, unfiltered sound.
met a little girl that really got me down now.
James Carr recorded this at Fame Studios in Muscle Shoals for Gold Wax Records out of Memphis, Tennessee. The song is simple on the surface, a man asking to be loved, to be needed, to have someone standing beside him. But in James Carr's voice, that simple request becomes something enormous.
Baby, you got my mind messed up now. Little girl, little girl.
It becomes a cry, An honest, open, vulnerable cry from a man who was not afraid to admit that love is not optional, that he needed it the way he needed air. And here's the layer that will stay with you.
Sure got my mind messed up now.
James Carr battled severe mental health challenges his entire career. There were recording sessions where he would stand in the studio and simply could not move. Couldn't sing, just frozen.
Go to bed, Lord, and I can't sleep. Sitting at the table.
Paralyzed by something inside him that the music couldn't always save him from. And yet when he was on, when that voice came out, producers and musicians who were there have said in interviews over the years that it was like nothing they had ever witnessed in a recording studio. He was that powerful.
Lord, I can't eat. Somebody please, hey.
Why is he forgotten by the mainstream? Partly the label. Gold Wax Records was a small independent operation out of Memphis. They didn't have the distribution muscle of Motown or Atlantic. A lot of his records simply never reached the cities that needed to hear them. And his personal struggles meant he couldn't build the kind of touring legacy that keeps an artist's name alive for decades. But here's the truth you need to carry with you. Among serious soul collectors, among the people who really know, Carr is sacred.
Jiggle plum dancing all in my mind. Every day you would.
DJs in England and Japan discovered him long after 1968 and turned him into a cult legend. Sometimes the world just takes longer to catch up to greatness. Stay with me, because number 8 is about to give you full chills.
If this song just hits you in that quiet place, don't let this moment be a one-time thing. Subscribe to Demo. We're building a home for real R&B and soul, the kind that heals, the kind that tells the truth. Hit subscribe and come back whenever you need a song that understands you.
Every story you see here takes hours of digging, piecing together history and bringing forgotten moments back to life. If you'd like to support that work, you can become a channel member. It's just the cost of a cup of coffee, but it helps us keep these stories alive, and for that, we're grateful. Number 8, Gladys Knight and the Pips, The End of Our Road. Now,
Best as I can. Too much for me, baby. More than my heart can stand.
here's a song that broke hearts without even trying. Imagine you're standing at the end of something, a relationship, a chapter, a love that used to feel like the whole world, and you have to face the truth that it is really over.
Like a kid behind the wheel, been reckless with my heart.
Not in a big dramatic fight, not with slamming doors, just in quiet sadness. That's the end of our road, and Gladys Knight sings it with such dignity, such grace, that she almost makes the pain feel like something worth having, because at least you felt it. At least it was real.
Around you surely tear it all apart. See the road's gotta hit again.
This was released on Soul Records, Motown's label, for slightly more mature, adult-focused material, and it was written and produced by Norman Whitfield and Barrett Strong. Yes, the same pair who would go on to completely reshape the Temptations sound in the years that followed.
Somewhere, oh, every road has gotta lead somewhere.
This track reached the top 5 on the R&B charts and showed a side of Gladys Knight that was softer, more still, more aching than the powerhouse, gospel-influenced performances she was known for. The Pips, her backing group, who were also her family, provided that warm cushion of harmony underneath her.
Now is the time for the showdown, so let me get the lowdown.
And there is something about the way family harmonizes together that you simply cannot manufacture in a studio. It is a different kind of warmth. It comes from somewhere deeper than training. Here is the thing that floors me. Gladys Knight was only 24 years old in 1968. 24 years old. And she sang this song like a woman who had already loved and lost many times over. That kind of emotional depth at that age is not learned. It is a gift.
think about all those nights you left me at home lonely. You only did.
Why has this one faded slightly from the conversation? Because 1968 was a busy year for Gladys Knight. There was other material competing for attention, and the end of our road was the quieter, slower sibling in the room. Radio in 1968 was beginning to feel the pressure of a changing landscape, faster tempos, bigger productions, more dramatic sounds. The deep, still ballad had to fight harder for its place at the table. But if you put this song on tonight in a quiet room with the lights down low, it will remind you that slow music was never weak music, never once. Number 7 is where I need you to really pay attention, because this one comes with a story behind the story, a story I promised you at the very beginning. Number 7, Clarence Carter, Slip Away.
But just a few more.
There is a reason they call it a secret sound. Slip Away is one of those songs that feels like it was made in the dark. Not in a bad way. In the way that the best and most honest conversations happen at 2 in the morning when your guard is down, when the day is finally over, and the truth just comes right out. Clarence Carter is singing about a love that cannot be spoken out loud, a love that has to stay hidden from the world. And he sings it with so much tenderness, so much warmth that you almost forget the complicated thing he is describing.
Just to have you near.
This was recorded at Fame Studios in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Produced by the legendary Rick Hall and released on Atlantic Records. Rick Hall was one of the truly great producers of that era, a man who understood that the best soul recordings need room.
Tell me you won't try.
They need space to breathe. The session musicians at Fame, known as the Swampers, were a group of musicians who could play soul and R&B at the absolute highest level. And the sound they created with Clarence Carter had an unusual warmth.
To slip away somehow.
Something you couldn't quite put your finger on, but you felt it from the first note. Slip Away reached number 6 on the pop charts and was a major R&B hit.
Oh, I need you, darling.
But now, here's the part I promised you. Earlier in this video, I told you one of these songs got quietly removed from certain radio playlists, not officially, not with any announcement, just silently pushed aside. This is that song.
I want to see you right now.
Slip Away is, on the surface, about sneaking away to be with someone you love, a secret meeting, hiding from the world. Most listeners heard it simply as a love song, romantic, tender, a little bit forbidden, in the way that makes love feel more alive.
Can you slip away? Slip away.
But some radio programmers in the American South in 1968, just months after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, heard something else in this record.
Slip away. Oh.
They heard a song that could be interpreted as being about a love that crossed racial lines. And in certain parts of the South in 1968, that was not a small thing. That was a dangerous thing.
I need you so.
Some stations quietly stopped scheduling it. No formal ban, no letter. Just the record stopped getting played. Now, did Clarence Carter intend for it to be heard that way? In interviews over the years, he has been thoughtful and careful about answering that question directly. He has said that the song is about love that must stay hidden, and that listeners will hear in it what they need to hear. There are different versions of this story. Some people say the resistance was purely about regional politics. and the racial tension of that period.
How sweet it is.
Others say it was simply about the morality of secret relationships, the sneaking around which some stations found questionable regardless of anything else. But here is what we know for certain. In the northern cities, in the black community, Slip Away became enormous. It became an anthem.
When you're stealing down, let me tell you something.
Because for a great many people, loving in a way the world did not approve of, hiding who you truly were was not just a poetic idea, it was daily life. The quiet resistance that surrounded this record in some markets only gave it more power.
How sweet it is.
When something is a little forbidden, it becomes more precious. Slip Away became the kind of record people played in private spaces and felt deeply, quietly understood by. Not despite the controversy, because of it.
Now I know it's wrong.
What this story tells us is something important about how art survives. Sometimes the attempts to silence a song are exactly what give it its longest life. Because the people who needed it most held on tightest, and they passed it down.
The things I ask you to do.
Clarence Carter went on to record more hits. But Slip Away is the one that comes up in every serious conversation about 1968 soul. Because it was not just a song, it was a mirror. And 1968 needed mirrors more than almost anything else.
But please believe me, darling.
Hold on to that feeling, because number 6 is about to show you what happens when one of the greatest groups in history steps into something quieter than anything you expected from them. Number 6, the Four Tops, Yesterday's Dreams now.
In this world of ups and downs, my dreams all fall through.
I know what might be going through your head right now. The Four Tops, Levi Stubbs, that enormous, powerful voice. Big productions, big drama? Yes. But Yesterday's Dreams is different.
Things just don't work out no matter what I do.
This is not I Can't Help Myself. This is not Reach Out, I'll Be There. This is the Four Tops in a softer, more private place. And it is absolutely beautiful.
Disappointment haunts me through each lonely day. The world around.
Yesterday's Dreams is a ballad about holding on to the memory of a love that is gone. It is that feeling you get when you find an old photograph at the back of a drawer.
And I see only shades of gray. But
When a particular smell pulls you back to a moment that no longer exists, when a song comes on the radio, and for 3 seconds, just 3 seconds, you are back there in that room with that person. And then it is gone again.
the lamplight shines upon my face. I'm in a different world.
Levi Stubbs, one of the most powerful voices in the entire history of recorded music, pulls something back on this record. He does not overwhelm you. He leans in close. He talks to you. And that restraint, that holding back, that makes it hit even harder than the big performances.
A world I never knew. I'm in a different world.
This was a Motown production coming out of the legendary Hitsville, USA. Studios in Detroit. The production team understood that the Four Tops were capable of far more range than the radio hits were showing the world.
A world so sweet and true. I'm in a different world.
The arrangement is lush without being overdone. Strings that feel like a warm blanket. Harmonies that hold you without ever squeezing too tight. The song made a solid showing on the charts, but never became the radio staple that their bigger hits did.
I'm no longer just another.
Here is something that always stays with me about this record. Levi Stubbs had what musicians called a natural ache in his voice. Even when the lyric wasn't particularly sad, even when he was singing something joyful, there was always a small pain underneath it.
Face in a crowd. Hey, look into my eyes. You see I'm strong.
Something human and imperfect. As he sang about yesterday's dreams, you didn't just believe him. You felt like he was singing about your dreams, your loss, your specific heartbreak.
And I'm proud. You were all the sweetness of my.
Why has this one faded? Because when most people think of the four tops, they reach for the big dramatic records. Yesterday's Dreams is too subtle, too still, too personal for the highlight reel. But in a list of the year's greatest ballads, it belongs right here. No question.
And you see, you have brought to heaven right here on earth.
Number 5 is one that if you were young and in love in the late 60s, you are going to feel in a very personal way. Number 5, Jerry Butler, Never Give You Up.
Never gonna give you up, no matter how.
Jerry Butler, the Iceman. Now you need to understand that nickname was never about being cold. It was about being cool, steady, unshakable. A man who could stand in front of a microphone and make every single person in the room feel like he was talking directly and only to them.
How you treat me, never gonna give you up.
Never Give You Up is a promise song. It is a man looking at the woman he loves and saying, no matter what comes for us, no matter what this world throws at us, I am not going anywhere. You cannot push me away. You cannot test me out of this. I am staying.
Don't you think of leaving? Girl, you treat me bad.
And in 1968, that kind of commitment meant something that it is hard to fully explain to someone who wasn't there. Because the world was full of things that were leaving. Hope was leaving, leaders were being taken, certainty had evaporated. Young men were being shipped to a war nobody believed in.
And I know why. Yeah, I've seen you.
And here comes Jerry Butler saying, I am not moving. This record was on Mercury Records, co-written by Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff. Yes, the same Gamble and Huff who would go on to build the entire Philadelphia soul sound, one of the most influential musical movements of the 1970s.
Running around with that other guy. And you think.
And Never Give You Up is one of the early blueprints of what that sound would become. You can hear it already in the arrangement, the sophistication, the layering, the way the song takes its time and builds like it. Trust you to stay with it.
If you hurt me, that I'll go away.
The fun fact here is that this record was a turning point for Jerry Butler's career. He had been somewhat stalled after his early success with For Your Precious Love. This record reminded the industry and the audience that Jerry Butler was not a one-song story.
So tell him.
He was a deep artist with a long career ahead of him, and he proved it. Why is this one underrated today? Because when Philadelphia soul became a phenomenon in the early 70s, it was so bright and so exciting that the records which predicted it got left behind in the rush.
Give you up,
Whisper in his ear.
no matter how you treat me.
People wanted the new thing once it arrived. But if you trace the line back, if you follow the roots, honestly, they lead right here to records like this one. This is where a revolution quietly began. And most people walked right past it.
Tell him that Jerry said he'll never let you go.
So don't you think of
Number 4 is one of the most beloved voices of the entire 20th century, doing something that is going to stop you completely in your tracks. Number 4, Stevie Wonder, For Once in My Life.
Once in my life, I have someone who needs me.
Now, I know you've heard this song, but have you really heard it? Have you sat with it? Have you listened to what it's actually saying? For Once in My Life is a song about a man who never believed real love was for him. A man who had watched other people have it, had told himself it was not something he was going to get.
When I've been so long, for once I'm
And then suddenly, when he least expected it, it happened. And the joy and the disbelief and the gratitude are all right there, living together in every single note.
afraid I can go where life leads me. somehow know I
Stevie Wonder was 18 years old when he recorded the definitive version of this song. 18. And he performed it with the warmth and the confidence and the depth of a man who had spent decades understanding what love really costs.
be strong. For once I can touch what my
This was on Motown's Tamla label, produced by Hank Cosby and Don Hunter. The arrangement is bright and full of life. It almost lifts you up off the ground.
heart used to dream of long before I knew.
The song had actually been recorded by other artists before Stevie got to it, including Tony Bennett and a number of others. But when Stevie recorded his version, he did not just cover it.
Oh, someone warm like you.
He transformed it. He took a pretty song and turned it into a soul anthem. He put something inside it that had not been there before. It hit number 2 on the pop charts and number 4 on the R&B charts.
Would make my dreams come true, yeah, baby.
It was his biggest record to that point in his career. Here is what most people don't know. Motown was not immediately sure about letting Stevie put out his version. They had heard the pop recordings.
Once in my life, I won't let sorrow hurt me.
They wondered if the song was too much of a standard, too soft, too mainstream for their audience. Stevie pushed for it. He heard something in that melody that others had not quite reached. A vulnerability, a gratitude, an honesty. He understood that R&B could express those feelings in a way no other format could.
Not like it's hurt me before. Oh, once I have.
He was right, as he almost always was. Does this song fade? No. This one has stayed, but it belongs on this list because 1968 is when it arrived, and it represents something essential about that year.
Someone I know won't desert me. I'm not alone.
It is the hopeful side of a devastating time. It is proof that joy still existed, that love was still worth singing about at the top of your lungs.
Anymore. Oh, once I can see.
And if number 4 gave you hope, number 3 is about to give you something else entirely. Number 3, The Temptations. I Wish It Would Rain.
Sunshine, blue skies, please go away.
I'm not being dramatic. I'm asking you to really be here for this. I Wish It Would Rain is one of the most emotionally precise recordings in the entire history of soul music. And I say that knowing the full weight of that statement.
A girl has found another and gone away.
The premise is heartbreaking in its simplicity. A man has lost the woman he loves. He cannot cry in public. He is a man. He is supposed to be strong. He is supposed to carry it.
With her went my future. My life is filled with
So he stands outside and he wishes, he prays that it would rain. So the rain can hide his tears, so nobody has to see him fall apart.
gloom. So day after day, I stay locked up.
David Ruffin delivers this vocal like a man standing at the edge of himself. His voice cracks in exactly the right places, and those cracks are not mistakes. They are the truth refusing to be held back.
In my room, I know to you, it might sound strange.
This was a Norman Whitfield and Barrett Strong composition, the same pair you heard earlier on Gladys Knight's entry, produced by Norman Whitfield for Motown's Gordy label.
But I wish it would rain. Oh, yeah.
It hit number 1 on the R&B charts and number 4 on the pop charts. It is considered one of the greatest Temptations recordings and one of the finest ballads of the entire decade.
Caught so badly.
Now here is the layer that changes every listen. David Ruffin was going through real personal difficulty during this period. His relationship with the other members of the group was becoming strained.
I wanna go outside, but everyone knows.
His personal life was complicated in ways that he was struggling to manage. And people who were present during the recording sessions have said in interviews over the years that the pain in that vocal was not entirely a performance.
That a man ain't supposed to cry. Listen, I gotta cry.
That David Ruffin was drawing on something very real and very present that day. We don't traffic in gossip here. We don't pretend to know exactly what was in David Ruffin's heart when that microphone was on. But here is what we do know.
'Cause crying.
The greatest soul performances happen when the singer and the song arrive at the same place at the same time. When what the lyric needs is exactly what the person behind it is carrying. On that day, in that Detroit studio, those two things met perfectly.
This is the pain, oh yeah. People just hurt, I feel.
Why does this song still matter? Because it speaks to something that goes far beyond 1968. The inability to grieve openly. The weight that men, and particularly black men in America at that time, were expected to carry without showing, without breaking.
Inside, words could never explain. I just wish it would rain.
This song gave people permission to feel. It said your pain is real, your tears are real, and that is not weakness, that is humanity. Number 2, Otis Redding sitting on the dock of the bay.
Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be
Take a breath. This song was recorded in November 1967. Otis Redding recorded it at Stax Studios in Memphis, Tennessee. It was produced by Steve Cropper, who also co-wrote it with Otis. It was released to the world in January 1968.
what?
Otis Redding never heard it on the radio. He died in a plane crash on December 10th, 1967. He was 26 years old. Sitting on the Dock of the Bay was released just weeks after his death, and it became his first and only #1 pop single.
The ships roll in, then I watch 'em roll.
Let that settle for a moment. The man who made this record never got to feel what it meant to the world. He never got to stand on a stage and sing it in front of a crowd who already knew every word.
Away again, yeah. I'm sitting on the
He never got to see it become one of the most played songs of the entire decade. He never got to know. The song itself is about a man who has come a long way from home and does not quite know where he fits anymore.
dock of the bay, watching the tide roll.
He is sitting by the water, watching the ships come in and go out, wasting time, as he calls it, on the dock of the bay. There is a loneliness in it that is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet. It is the loneliness of a man who has not yet found his place,
Sitting on the dock of the
who is still waiting, still watching, and then the song ends. And instead of one final vocal line, there is a whistle, soft and slow, floating out over the water. Steve Cropper has said in interviews that the whistling at the end was a placeholder, something Otis put in because he had not yet finished writing the final verse. They were going to come back, fix it, finish it properly.
I left my home in Georgia.
They never came back to it. So the song ends with an unfinished thought, a man whistling quietly to himself by the water, and we never got to hear what came next.
Headed for the Frisco Bay.
Some people say that ending, that imperfect, unfinished, honest ending, is actually what makes this song eternal. It is not polished, it is not wrapped up neatly, it is human.
I've had nothing to live for.
And that is what Otis Redding always was. Warm, reaching forward, never quite finished because he was always moving towards something more.
Look like nothing's gonna come my way. So
What Dock of the Bay did for 1968 was give the year a soundtrack for a particular kind of loss. Not angry loss, not bitter loss. Quiet, reflective, bewildered loss.
I'm just gonna sit on the dock of the
watching.
The kind that comes when the world changes so fast that you are not even sure what you are mourning anymore. Just that something important is gone. Just that things are not what they were.
The tide rolled away.
And in 1968, that was exactly where the whole world was sitting. This is not just a great song. It is a document. A farewell that was never meant to be one. A final message from a 26-year-old man who had more to say and never got the time to say it.
If this song just hit you in that quiet place, don't let this moment be a one-time thing. Subscribe to Demo. We're building a home for real R&B and soul. The kind that heals, the kind that tells the truth. Hit subscribe and come back whenever you need a song that understands you.
Every story you see here takes hours of digging, piecing together history, and bringing forgotten moments back to life. If you'd like to support that work, you can become a channel member. It's just the cost of a cup of coffee, but it helps us keep these stories alive, and for that, we're grateful. Number 1, Marvin Gaye, I Heard It Through the Grapevine. Here we are. The number 1 ballad of 1968, the song that holds the whole year inside it. I Heard It Through the Grapevine is a song about betrayal. About finding out through rumor, through whispers, through someone talking when they shouldn't have been, that the person you trusted most has not been who you thought they were. And instead of rage, what Marvin Gaye gives you is something slower and more devastating than rage. He gives you dread. That pulse in the music, that piano, those drums, the echo on his voice, everything in the production, and this was Norman Whitfield again, for Motown's Tamla label, is designed to make you feel the ground shifting under your feet. You don't feel safe from the very first note, and you don't feel safe when it ends. That is intentional. That is genius now. Here is the story that most people have never been told. Marvin Gaye was not the first person to record this song. Smokey Robinson and the Miracles cut an early version in 1966. Then Motown asked Marvin to record it in 1967. Marvin went in and made what most music historians now consider one of the greatest soul vocal performances ever committed to tape. And Berry Gordy, the founder of Motown, one of the most successful music executives in history, listened to it and decided not to release it. He felt it was too dark, too heavy, not the direction he wanted for Marvin at that moment. So he shelved it. Then in 1967, Gladys Knight and the Pips recorded their own version of the song. Motown released that one, and it became a hit number 2 on the pop charts. Number 1 on R&B. The world had already told Berry Gordy what this song could do. The audience had voted. Still, he held Marvin's version back. It was only when the In the Groove album needed to be filled out with strong material, and there is pressure in the industry when albums need delivering, that Marvin's version was finally included. And there are different accounts of exactly what pushed the release of the single. Some people point to internal pressure at the label. Others to fan response to the album track. The full story has more than one version depending on who is telling it. What is not in dispute is what happened when it was released, October 1968. Marvin's Grapevine goes out to the world, and the world responds immediately, completely, and without hesitation. goes to #1 on the pop charts, #1 on R&B. It stays at #1 for 7 weeks. 7 weeks. It becomes the best-selling Motown single in the label's history up to that point. Let's be fully honest about what that moment means. Berry Gordy, a brilliant man, a man who built an empire from nothing, was wrong. He listened to one of the most extraordinary vocal performances ever captured on tape and said, not yet. Maybe not at all. And the people proved him wrong in the most public, most decisive way possible. Now, there are different ways to understand that decision. Some people say Gordy was being strategic, that the market needed to be ready, that the Gladys Knight version had to pave the way first. Others say it was about control, about an artist who was beginning to push beyond the boundaries the label had drawn for him. In interviews over many years, different people from inside Motown have told different versions of this story. What we can say with absolute certainty is that when the people finally heard Marvin's Grapevine, they did not need convincing. They did not need time. They heard it and they knew immediately, completely, in their bones. The truth does not need a publicist, does not need a campaign. It just needs to be heard. I heard it. Through the Grapevine is the #1 ballad of 1968 because it contains everything that year was made of. The suspicion, the dread. The quiet, devastating understanding that things are not what you believe them to be. That the world and the people in it can hurt you in ways you never saw coming. That trust is fragile. That love is not always what it appears. And Marvin Gaye sang all of that in 4 minutes and 1 second. That is what soul music is capable of at its highest level. Not entertainment, not pretty melody, the truth. The whole complicated, painful, irreplaceable truth.